You cannot care about people outside the company if you don't care about your teammates. Caring within a team, to me, is really key. And that's where the power of middle manager lies also.
If you provide unconditional care to your customers, they become extremely loyal to you.
Today, we're joined by two pioneers in organizational transformation, Getz, professor at ESCP Business School and thought leader, and Laurent Marbacher, a team coach and mentor. Together, Isaac and Laurent have spent a decade researching organizations that treat clients, suppliers, and communities with genuine care. Their new book, The Caring Company, offers a sustainable, human-focused approach to business success.
When we talk about transformation, many people think about adding new things. Instead of adding new things, it's been more a case of removing things.
They seek to treat these members of their business ecosystem, their clients, suppliers, local community members, as if they were their friends.
Many indicators, processes, way of being within the company, in fact, hinders people from having this kind of friendly or caring relationship.
Are you hopeful that there's momentum in this approach that will continue to increase, or do they remain as slightly quirky outliers, the people who take this approach?
What unites us, both of us, me and Laurent, is
Hello, Isaac and Laurent. Welcome to The Power Between.
Hello, Roddy.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to have you both with us today in our first two-guest episode here on The Power Between. So we're trying something a little bit new. And Isaac, it's good to be back in conversation with you after many years. You wrote an excellent piece for article in our 5th issue of Developing Leaders Quarterly, way back in 2013 on liberating leadership, which I'll reference in just a minute. But here today, we're here to discuss the ideas in your radical new book, The Caring Company, which we can also see in the background behind you, Laurent. And I'm delighted that, Isaac, you're joined here by Laurent Marbacher. So you're both very welcome.
Thank you.
Before we explore the thinking in the book, it would be great to understand a little more about the context that brought you both together and made you want to write this book. So please share with us a little bit about yourselves and how you decided to work together on it.
So Laurent, if you want, I'll make a quick transition and then I let you to continue. But you, in fact, Roddy introduced already the reason why we met with Laurent, because this piece that I wrote on liberating leadership, it in fact followed my earlier research, and Laurent, as being extremely curious and reading a lot of articles, including academic, he read my article in the California Management Review, and through a common friend, a liberating leader, Jean-François Zobariste, we met one weekend at the country house, and we clicked immediately, and we collaborated for quite a long time, about maybe 10 years, right, to create a real dynamics of what we called later corporate liberation. It means this transformation of, let's say, managerial practices in the companies that turn towards the care of employees. So how managers become, let's say, to use another term, become servant leaders, right? But it's not through the training that you do that, it's through the real transformation of the entire company. So that's our collaboration. And Laurent may tell us what happened around 2014 something, when we started to talk about this topic that led to this book and this research.
Yes, because my job is more the one of a team coach and mentor for transformations, and I noticed, and it's the same with his own clients, that people were at some point very much inward oriented, but they could in fact lose also the view of what the company stands for, in the beginning. So we started to have these conversations about what happens if you treat people as adult human beings, also the people who are at the door of your company, not just if you treat people like adults within the company. And that led us to a 5-year research on 3 continents to discover companies that had a special way of behaving and of handling relationships with their people, counterparts, be it clients, suppliers, or local communities.
And that obviously resonates very much with that liberating leadership piece, because I remember in that article, Isaac, you referred to a lot of the status quo approach to leadership in organizations has still been quite medieval and treating people as children, and obviously the flip side of that is giving people more responsibility and allowing them to be adults, and we see when that happens that engagement increases and that and performance as a result, when people are given some relevance. So the book that you've just written, The Caring Company, a wide sort of purview, sort of panorama of what it explores, and a lot of it is looking externally from the organization and how the company can be doing good. So before we perhaps jump into the internal part, it would be interesting to understand what you're suggesting in the book there, and what the change is that you're offering.
Okay, I maybe start, and then Laurent will give the definition of the caring company and everything. But I like transitions, and you're in Edinburgh.
I am in Edinburgh.
And we extremely honored by the fact, because we talk a lot about Adam Smith.
Okay.
And it's not by chance that we call our book The Caring Company, How to Shift Business and the Economy. Because in fact, what we do challenge, and something that Adam Smith, as you know, was also a moral philosopher, not only the economic theorist, is the one of the 2 bases of the capitalist economy, the one everyone talks about the profit. We talk a lot about it a little bit too, of course, and it's a very important part. But we question another fundamental basis of the economy, which are self-interested transactions. And this is the basis on which companies construct their relationship with their clients, with their suppliers, and the local community, subsidies and whatever you give us, and then we come and open the supermarket in your area and so on. And we asked ourselves whether it is possible, since there are human beings there, right? That they're not some kind of abstract entities or machines. Is there a possibility to build the relationship with them on another basis? We call them this basis a care. So how you can provide an unconditional care to these people, which Adam Smith said is the ideal thing, but at the same time said it's impossible. You can have this type of relationship with maybe a dozen of your friends, or several dozen, but not with thousands and thousands of clients and suppliers. So in the economy, the more pragmatic, and I know probably Scottish are very pragmatic, right? The more pragmatic approach is just self-interest, and just let's do transactions wherever there's a win-win for both sides. And so that is, let's say, fundamentally in terms of the thought piece, right? One of the things that we really question, and we show that yes, there are companies, and there is an approach that is not built on self-interest in transactions and still economically extremely reliable and working. Now, Laurent will explain what is it in these companies.
Yeah, maybe because you mentioned Adam Smith, and I think it's interesting also this word of self-interest. I think we use it today in the economy or in business in a way that probably was not exactly the way Adam Smith would use it, because self-interest, it comes from medieval philosophy, where it all has to do with, take care of yourself and think about yourself if you want to take care about the others. The kind of golden rule is in there. And now it seems that in the economy, we interpret self-interest more like greed, so that's something, very, very different from what we noticed in the companies we've studied. And so to move on the definition of the caring company, to us, it was really a kind of surprise when we started this research and we visited dozens of companies, and we saw some sort of new species, like Darwin visiting the world, and we say, hey, but these companies operate with a very different mindset, philosophy, or way of doing things and behaving. And so the formal definition means that the characteristics we've noticed in all these companies define it that way. They serve their business ecosystem members, the clients, the suppliers, and the local communities unconditionally and through their core business processes. And then by doing so, they enjoy unrivaled long-term prosperity. So all the terms are important here, but instead of talking of stakeholders, as Isaac mentioned, which can be some abstract people, we talk about members of the ecosystem. So, for instance, we have example in the book where we start with this in the introduction. You might have seen that, but you can say, okay, my logistics are held by a company, and then my stakeholder is these companies that move the trucks, etc. But LSDH, a company we've studied in France, they start by welcoming the truck driver, at the gate of the factory, and the truck driver can rest, can have free food, can have showers, etc. So it's really
a little bit like a business lounge for them.
Yeah.
Free.
Yes, absolutely. So they care for people, not for abstract things. So that's the first thing, members of the ecosystem. The second thing is the word unconditionally, which means that they don't do that with a kind of thinking that, okay, if I do that, then I will get better performance, better result. They do it for the sake of doing it because they respect the people they have in front of them. And so that's also very important. They don't look at the other as
a tool, as a mean.
As a mean, yes, absolutely. And then what is also very important to us in our definition is the fact that we've seen that these companies do good, not as an extra thing, like philanthropy, or once you've done your good profit, then you can have some kind of CSR activity.
It's not an offset thing.
Yes.
When it's a good year, when it's a bad year, you stop.
Absolutely. So, but they do it through their core business processes, which means the daily activities, the daily relationships they have with all these members of the ecosystem.
Fantastic, and obviously, being an Edinburgh citizen, I'm delighted with that Adam Smith connection, and I have a copy of Moral Sentiment sitting up here on my.
Is it signed, Roddy?
Well, I went to a lunch at Panmure House, which is Adam Smith's home here in Edinburgh, and the lady who now looks after it was able to recite the opening paragraph, which in fact is the core of it, I think. And I won't go through it all because it's about 15 lines, but it's exactly this point. How selfish soever man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his nature which interest him in the fortune of others, and that's the key part, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And that's the bit that we miss in the Wealth of Nations, where we all think about the pin factory and pulling everything down to the most sort of minuscule of efficiencies. But in fact, it's that bit within where we're interested in other people flourishing too.
Absolutely.
That gives us life.
And in fact, during the research, we also discovered that, do you know how many times the expression the invisible hand appears in the thousands of pages. Sorry?
I don't, but I suspect it's not too often, if at all, is it?
Twice.
It is twice.
Twice.
Yeah, well, so the market is, yeah. It's a 20th century phenomena, I think, isn't
Absolutely.
it?
As we say, we conclude with Laurent after, doing also this kind of like philology in a way that it says more about us and about mindset today than about Adam Smith, in fact, this moral philosophy.
I think that's right. Yeah, and we completely focus on the wealth of nations and its side rather than the moral philosophy around the moral sentiment. It's this word unconditional I find fascinating, though, because it's that's uncompromising. If you're doing something without conditions, you're doing it. You're fully committed to it.
It's even shocking. It's even shocking, no?
It is slightly shocking, yeah, and it's why I introduced right at the beginning that your book as being a radical book, because to do something unconditionally is.
I don't know if this is a good promotional argument, in Anglo-Saxon world, but it's true. It's not revolutionary. Let's agree with that. Okay, right. It's radical.
It's radical. No, but I think radical's good. We need radical change.
Yeah, and radical, comes from the Latin radix, radicis, which means the root. So I think that also this comes back to the root of many businesses, actually, because people don't, start businesses just for the sake of earning and being as rich as possible.
In fact, they don't. Research shows that they don't, in fact.
Yeah.
We quote a very important Stanford and Princeton research that was the nascent entrepreneurs, and it's overwhelmingly they're not starting business to become rich. That's not the motive.
So the root of business, what is radical is the root, and this root is the root of entrepreneurship, and it has to do with providing a service to society.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking at the book cover over your shoulder there, Laurent, and
yeah.
Someone's holding on to the root of that sapling. And that's what we need to nurture. Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
I mean, the concept, I think, we understand, but the difficulty, the challenge so often with these things is then putting it into practice, and particularly putting it into practice in existing organizations where structures already exist. And the challenge then is how you evolve, amend those structures and the mindset. Now, clearly there needs to be a strong leadership, a strong piece of direction from the top. That is, critical. But also within, it's not going to happen unless you pull people along within the middle of organizations, which is what the Power Between is particularly interested in exploring. So if mid-level managers operate directly between the traditional profit maximizing pressures of this old paradigm and this new vision of unconditional care, how can they effectively sustain and protect their team to do that whilst focusing on a caring relationship? Because it sounds almost like you're exposing people to criticism there rather than building a protection around them.
So maybe I start and then Laurent continue. I maybe bring first the sentence that we often use so that people understand what do we mean by conditional. And the term of friends was used by Adam Smith, right? So we say that these companies, they seek to treat these members of their business ecosystem, their clients, suppliers, local community members, as if they were their friends. Now, if you invite your friend to your, let's say country house or whatever, or even, in Edinburgh, maybe nice house in Edinburgh, okay, or for a weekend, and you say, come stay with us. You're not going to say him, you are my friend unless you don't cost me too much, or unless I have a return on my investment in you, right? You're not doing that. So when that is what we mean they treating unconditionally. It means you really take care of that person, right? Now, example, and specifically about the managers. It's absolutely true, and we, with being with Laurent, both of us sort of experts of transformational leadership, we obviously went to see always the CEO who initiated this transformation, unless he passed away, and then we met some people who knew him, like in Handelsbanken, right, the Rollander. But most of the time we talked to the people who did this transformation. So it's very important, because this whole vision, right? We don't like too much talk purpose, but it's the vision of this company, right? Instead of being profit maximizer, right? Is how we create a company where we provide this unconditional care, right? This is the big change of vision that usually originates with this leader. But then obviously he can't do that. You know, the company, well, now I'll talk about Eisai, which is at time was even top 20 pharmaceutical, maybe they're now top 30 pharmaceutical. So you would talk about maybe, I don't know, 8,000 people working there, Laurent, if I remember well, something like that.
Yeah, something.
And so he can't go around and talk to everyone, right? And he can't ensure that in every team, employees they relate to the customers, to suppliers, based on this unconditional care. So this is a kind of like a call, right? The invitation. And then he said this Naito, he said, I invite now everyone to rethink their activities in order to, and they defined it there in more specific terms, to relieve the suffering of our patients and their families, because they mostly produce drugs for neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer, Parkinson, and so on. So that's what we are here, right? What does it mean unconditional care? We do everything to relieve the suffering of these patients and their families. And then he invites everyone to rethink. And now here we have, so we saw examples and describe how an R&D researcher went to a nursing home, and he was concerned because he noticed that they can swallow, many old people, because of their inflamed throat, they can swallow pills. So he worked very, very long project, and driven by him, how to make it in a jelly form. So the only thing that they can swallow. Okay. And they, when they put it on the market, that's unconditional, right? It was 5 times more expensive to produce, but they sold it at the same price. Okay, well, now being Japanese, they reduced the cost to 1.5. But still, that was not the point, they said. The point was, if we really want to relieve the suffering, then these people had to get the formula inside of them. If they can swallow it, or they have to use a hammer to crush the pill, the nurse, then it's not, we're not doing our best. Now, managers. At some point, managers say, okay, but we are, salespeople are with contact eventually somehow with patients or with doctors. There's a lot of people, but we managers, we're not in contact with them. We don't know patients. We don't know their families. And one of the things they did, and it was organized, that hundreds and hundreds of these managers spent about a week altogether in the nursing homes, being just with these elderly patients with this all memory problems, Alzheimer disease, and they would just wash their feet and they help them to feed them, like being like these nurses that help, right, elderly people. And out of that, when they came back, came a whole string of innovations. And not they had ideas, but also they shared eventually challenges and problems that they observed with their teams, and invited these teams in order to find solutions to all these issues, in order to relieve the suffering of the patients and their families. So this is just one example of how managers, so it's not simply, I would say, it's also important, and Laurent will talk about it, of changing the way you let's say run your team, right? If it's simple kind of hierarchical structure and so on, it's also problematic. But even in being closer, being there where there are these human beings, right, with whom we are dealing, that is also one thing that in these companies we observed. So I'd like now to Laurent maybe give some other examples and explain.
Well, yes. What I would add maybe is also the fact that when we talk about transformation, many people think about adding new things or adding new projects or initiatives or whatever. And what we've studied and seen in many companies, particularly in the big case, we're having a whole chapter on this Swedish bank, Handelsbanken, is that instead of adding,
and British, Laurent.
yes, you're
Yeah,
right,
big here too.
and British, something like 200 branches in the UK. So, but instead of adding new things, it's been more a case of removing things, because most of the time, many indicators, processes, way of being within the company, in fact, hinders people from having this kind of friendly or caring relationship with people outside. So when we talk about, sometimes people say, okay, we need to move from a top-down culture towards a bottom-up one. Actually, it's not that much bottom up, but inside out. And I like, I may, if I may, have another interpretation of the title of your podcast, because there is the power between, yeah, and I mean what happens in the middle of organizations, but there is also a power between, all the people wherever they are in the organization and the clients, the customers,
Yeah.
the suppliers, and so it's the power lies between people in the relationships. So to me, that's really key, and we've seen that also. All these KPIs or whatever that if you go to your bank and you know that in the back of his mind, your advisor has a target of selling as many products, you're not quite confident and trusting what is going to advise you. So it's a case of removing. And then the other thing I wanted to mention also is that, to me and to our experience, the team is the core space where you can learn what caring means, because you cannot care about people outside the company if you don't care about your teammates, because they are the one you meet day after day. And so caring within a team, to me, is really key, and that's where the power of middle manager lies. Also, it lies in how do you really create a trusting relationship where people really care for one another.
I maybe add the example from Handelsbanken,
Yeah.
so you can see concretely. They give essentially the keys to the bank, to the business, to every advisor. So the advisor decides 80% of loan decisions, so everything is decided at the level of a branch, and basically the advisor decides it almost on the spot. And he may decide, by the way, to provide a loan, but also to refuse. So here is a recipe how to build a successful bank: refuse the loan to the client. But in fact, and they gave us the example, when you refuse a loan and you explain why, because we care about you and we looked at your profile and we think you will be really in the hardship to trying to reimburse that. We don't advise you. In fact, we don't want to put you in this situation. And these people, in fact, you sort of lose business. Some of these people come back and they say, we want to work with you because you are the only one that we see that you care about it, and they looked really in our situation.
It's
So
interesting, isn't it?
it's very interesting. It's kind of like I would say counterintuitive. And now just to finish, and this is what Laurent mentioned. Now, how do you create in your branch? And we met branch managers or directors, right? How do you create this environment where this every advisor is in this situation and he has all this authority and all his latitude and discretion to do these things? And that's where your role here, right? Not to tell them what to do, not to create guidelines, constraints, all that, but we trust you, and including with interns. Can you imagine that? Even not salaried, you're an intern, you're here in the branch, people come, they relate to you, they don't know who you are. We want you, because we selected you, we want you to be able to listen and to provide the answer as much as quickly as possible on the spot. Just to finish that, it's also interesting in terms of the management. They basically don't need to hire people, because these interns, they observe them and then they go back maybe to 1 year or study still to university, but they say, okay, we liked you, if you want to come back. And most of the positions are filled with, they don't need to advertise, with people like that they test it. They give you this freedom, this latitude, this discretion. If you used it and you became responsible and you used it responsibly, but you did act to care about our customers, they call them customers, we want you back. And that's what managers are doing, this kind of dynamics within the branch, was just being this servant leader, right? To providing these people all the opportunities, the means, the processes. There are, of course, processes. I mean, you don't just throw money like that, but it's being behind and giving them, putting them in front of these customers in this case, so that they can provide this unconditional care. So that's the example.
The sort of corollary, or the flip side of that is interesting. The bank that we bank with used to provide us with what they termed as relationship managers, which suggested that they knew what we were doing, but they never knew what we were doing. Just when you were saying that now, explaining what Handelsbanken can do, which is very relational and relationship based,
Absolutely.
it occurred to me that they no longer use that phrase, and we're just shoved into a sort of large team to be dealt.
They use a metaphor very interesting that comes from Wallander, the CEO who transformed this bank, and they said, we want our advisors to behave like a family doctor or general practitioner, right, or family nurse, that they do everything to take care of your physical health. We want to do everything to take care of your financial health, which is also extremely important for you, right?
Yeah, well, which impacts your physical health too.
Also.
And so it came to a surprise for Handelsbanken to be named, I don't know how many years ago, but the best private bank of
several times.
Best private bank of the UK, but they're not a private bank; they're a retail bank. So.
That shows you the level, right, of care. It's basically, if you're a private bank, oh, please come, you have this sofa, you have a private advisor and this, and then and by the way, we tested with Laurent, we were in Stockholm, in the, like city in London, right? This area, very, very financial zone in this branch, and there is kind of like a business lounge with very designed Scandinavian furniture and very, and we sit there, and when then we ask this director of this branch and said, are these because we have these wealthy people, and said, the guy that sits there, probably one of the wealthiest, he pointed with the finger, right? But you can be a teacher, or you can be an employee, that everyone is treated in exactly the same way.
But the interesting thing about Handelsbanken and Eisai, I mean, all the other companies that you profile in the book, is they outperform their peers, don't they? So they have this expansive, caring approach, and yet, which the skeptics would say, is costly and damaging, and goes against that self-interest, the profit maximizing approach. And yet, they're outperforming, and they're returning higher results. And then there's the little things too that make their lives easier, which is people want to work for them, and they have longer term employee retention, and they've got much better employee value propositions, and
higher engagement also.
And higher engagement.
Yeah.
I mean, who did you see out of all those organizations that you sort of felt had made the biggest turnaround perhaps around that, or was sort of really impactful in that area?
Laurent?
I'm not sure I got your question. Sorry, Roddy.
Which of those companies that you look
Yeah.
at sort of really exemplify?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, Handelsbanken is one of the most, where we have the most. It's 30 years ago these changes occurred. So we have a kind of 50 years. Maybe other examples interesting are what happened during crisis, because we started with this research before the COVID, and so we've seen some companies that not only took advantage of the crisis, but really transformed themselves and changed. For instance, we have in a case in the book of the fruit guys who deliver fresh fruit. They started, with the big names of the Silicon Valley, and they were,
Fruit baskets, right? To
yes, fruit baskets for employees. But then they totally pivoted towards a B2C kind of business all over the United States, because they had to change their way because of COVID, and that was really natural to them. They just followed what their customers were wanting, and it didn't came as as a big mindset shift or change. It was just a continuous thing, so that seemed obvious. Also, in terms of how they treated the employees. Maybe you want to comment that.
Yeah, this is very interesting. In particular, giving your focus, Roddy, on employees, because everyone advised this Chris Mittelstadt, the owner, and he said, you just mothball your whole company, because the government, threw in some money and so on, and wait until this whole COVID thing goes away, right? And he just couldn't imagine with managers to furlough people or fire people or do things like that. So they just said, no, there's no way we're going to do that. We care about our employees. We build the whole company, 90 people around, caring about them, and we're not going to do that. We'll find ways to survive. Maybe we'll be losing money for some time, but let's lose not too much so we're not crashing. And so they started immediately to work. I think they did this kind of like urgent emergency meetings, and the whole management were sitting, and they found how to pivot. They also, I think, supplied some hospitals or some healthcare institutions. So, but anyway, there was not, even because of the way they manage inside, it also was one of the, I would say, we call it not resilience, right, Laurent? We use another term, efficiency and anti-fragile. But we also, you remember, you mentioned Roddy, and the other one is like it's about vitality, right?
There's a window of
vitality, right? And there is a resilience. So the way you treat employees provides you this resilience, and it's very important also in terms of crisis. Maybe I will add one more little thing about the something that you mentioned that appears as the sure way. Like, the book is so radical that it's a sure way how to ruin your business, right? So just throw the money away. People will come and they abuse you, obviously, right? Everyone will abuse you. You're known to be so nice, so you give away stuff and so on and so on. And in fact, there are two comments about it. Number one is that we discussed with many of these companies, and said what about maybe 2-3% abuse of customers, that they know that you are providing this unconditional care, but most don't. So this is one thing. So why not to focus on this 97% of customers through which we will prosper, by the way. And this is the one thing. The second thing is almost opposite to what people think. In fact, it's a common sense. And as our friend with Laurent says, Bob Davids, common sense is not common at all. It is common sense that if you provide unconditional care to your customers, they become extremely loyal to you. So they become what is considered to be the whole, how said, graal, yes, the holy
Grail.
the repeat customer, right? So they come back to you. And when they come back to you, by the way, are going to buy the same amount or more, they're going to buy more. And even if they're not coming back, to whom they tell this incredible story of how you cared about them during the dinner, to friends and so on. So they become your business promoters. We know how it's important, right? Now, how about suppliers? These suppliers become dedicated to you. Everyone knows that supplier's problem is not supplier's problems, it's your problem. So your supplier is ready to go what's called extra mile? Well, say, so that's not in contract. That's not the contract. We can deliver you 3 days ahead because it will cost too much money. You'll have to pay for that. So having a dedicated, and they say, by the way, we're going to do that for you. We're not going to charge you. And we're not doing to your competitors. We're doing it to you because you care about us. Now about these communities, instead of knowing that you are here to make a deal, right? Art of the deal, that will negotiate from you, from this city or this area, some subsidies and so on and so, almost blackmailing, right? Who is giving us more subsidies? That's where we'll open the plant. And by the way, when the economic situation, so we just offshore the whole thing and close the plant, right? Or you're here as the citizens, and we are here really to care about the inhabitants of this area, and we want to contribute to the wealth and well-being of people who live there, their families and so on. These communities, of course, are more supportive. They will help you maybe with this or that area and saying, by the way, something opened up, are you interested, and so on and so on. So all these things together, when you put, obviously contribute to the higher prosperity of these companies in comparison. It's always in comparison to their competitors, right? So to finish with Handelsbanken, Laurent said 50 years, right? They every year for 50 years in a row, they outperform on return on equity, which is one of the measures of banking, their competitors in all their home markets. Not 1 year they missed. And they lived through 3 crises, right? There was this bubble, real estate bubble in Sweden, then there was the Lehman Brothers, and there was a COVID. Everyone crashed, but they crashed the least. All the banks were nationalized. Never Handelsbanken, ever. They even didn't go to the shareholders saying you need to put more money into the company. They didn't do it either. They said we want to be an asset to the society, not a burden. So that's how you get these companies prosperous, thanks to the unconditional care.
And there's another element to this, which you touched on just there too, which is this sort of local impact. It's that, which goes hand in hand, I suppose, with community building. But it seems that caring companies prioritize local over, and that face-to-face relationship. Is that something you saw across all of them, or
right?
And is it something that they do deliberately, I suppose, or does it come as an outcome of how they want to behave?
Actually, I would say it comes in different cases. For instance, in the case of LSDH, the case I mentioned, which is a
industrial dairy.
Impact milk or packed juices for LSDH. At some point, knew about the future purchase of a salad company close to their main headquarters. And, there's nothing to do, the business of packed juices or packed milk has nothing to do with salads. But over the weekend, the CEO thought about this and said, hey, but if this larger group buys this salad business, then maybe friends or relatives of my employees might lose their job because of, rationalizations or whatever. Synergies, yes. And so he thought about it over the weekend and made a counter offer. And he made the deal. and then, but just because he wanted to, to preserve the local people, and he was concerned by that, and then just only after he made the deal, then there's an economic value that came in, because in the trucks, the packed meal and juices are very heavy, so you just have two-third of the truck, and then they say, hey, why don't we put the salad on the top? And so that gives kind of a zero euro delivery cost. Yes. So but the purpose was really caring for the local community, and we have other cases like that, but what I mean is that sometimes, like in this case, it's really embedded in the way the leader is thinking. In other cases, we have this case of a company in California. It only came after several years of entrepreneurship, and when they discovered that they sell, the herbal teas,
medicinal,
yes.
So some kind of health benefits.
Okay.
Yeah, and they discovered, little by little, the global market, how it was done, with child labor, with margin taken in different steps, but not going to the people working the land.
Laborers. Yeah.
Yes, and so step by step, as they say, village after village, they kind of recovered a different way of doing business with these people. So the stories are often very different. Some people have a very clear view of what they have to do. Others just discover it, but they discover it because they care, for one person after another, and then they try to do their best in caring for these people.
Yeah, it's compelling, isn't it? And it's really interesting how those different elements sort of feed together into the wider ecosystem and enable those outcomes to prosper. I'm aware that we're running out of time, but I think the issue is having looked at these organizations and got to speak to the people who lead them and the people who work within them. Are you hopeful that there's momentum in this approach that will continue to increase, or do they remain as slightly quirky outliers, the people who take this approach? Because we know that the big financial system is still heavily dependent on certain metrics.
Absolutely.
And these.
It's a very good closing statement. So Laurent will give his own view, but what unites us, both of us, me and Laurent, is that we already did this shift from dreamers or kind of utopians, right, to the reality of creating the dynamics of hundreds of companies. We talked about this, liberated companies, right? Liberated leadership. So we saw that it is possible to start with a few examples that inspire and some kind of concepts. That's what we did, right? Some kind of business philosophy, and then inspire hundreds of other companies and organizations. So that's what we hope to do. And Laurent maybe will give some details.
Well, yes, we wouldn't have written that book, and if we don't believe that this was sound and has a future, because it's not just fairy tales, that we say, oh yes, these companies may exist and it's beautiful, but we truly believe that given the kind of shortcomings of current way of doing business, in the long term, we guess that only companies that really operate with an understanding of what human nature is, they will resist all the turmoils and things that may happen. We've seen that in the crisis for these caring companies. So we see this way of doing business as the most robust and future-proof that we can imagine. So to us, yes, it's kind of obvious, and probably maybe in 20 or 30 years, people will look at the book and say, oh, but these companies they were already doing that, but they only did it that way. Now we've done a lot of progress to do even better. So that's our view about it. But Isaac,
Laurent, maybe you want to add that not only with you, but we created a community, right? On
absolutely.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
People can find us through LinkedIn, simply Laurent or me, or write to our The Caring Company book.com, and we'll direct them to, and we have already about 200 people who are in this community, even before the book came out, right?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of, and many of, they're all of them, in fact, actors in the economy, right? So there are many people interested in this topic.
And I would also add middle managers, because this is also one of your focus points. Middle managers are kind of today, as a human beings, they know how to behave, how to do things in the right way, but sometimes they have kind of pressure to do differently.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult for them. So I think that they can also have a role in explaining to the top, what their customers, what suppliers, how it works better, because this is natural in human nature.
We have even a specific concrete advice. I mean, explaining something to your CEO, is challenging, but this is really from it's a true story. Buy our book, leave it on the desk of your CEO while he's not here, or ask the executive assistant, and then come later and say, wow, you're reading this book. Oh, I also read this book. Let's talk about it. And so you can be this change agent in your organization.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant plan. Yeah, I think we should encourage everyone to do that. Excellent. But seriously, as well, that there is a role there for people in the middle of organizations, for mid-level leaders, middle managers to do that. And there's so much sort of evidence in the book that it supports that thinking. So people should be encouraged to do, to really push for it, because
Absolutely.
it does create, as you say, much more robust organizations.
Yeah.
We are, I'm afraid, as always, against the clock and out of time. But Isaac and Laurent, thank you both very much indeed. It's been a fabulous conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.